Welcome to another episode of my podcast. That's fine with me. Today we're going to be talking about Blake Lively, Times Magazine, and what was the reason and the decision behind the most influential woman of the year, one of the most influential people of the year, because they have, if I'm not mistaken, 100 people in their list. That is the main reason why we're going to just dive into this, and I have the perfect explanation for their decision. We're going to get started with Times history. In 1923, two promising journalists, they started their magazine, and they had a radical idea, really interesting, that they're going to create news in the short form, more like in a novel story way, and they're going to share it with people. And they didn't want to focus on stories that related to one topic only. They were talking about education system and science, politics, what else? Entertainment, pop culture, culture itself, and people really love this idea. Let's talk about this journalist. The first one was Harry Lewis, and the second one is Brighton Haddon. Brighton Haddon, he took control of journalism itself. He was hiring people, he was writing the stories, and we would call him a creative director in 2025, I would say. And Harry Lewis, he was in charge of finances and fighting people to invest in their business, in their magazine. This was a clear division between both of them, but later, in 1929, Haddon died, and he chose a little bit more conservative approach to a magazine. And later, when he took a creative control because of the loss, he actually decided to go in a little bit different direction, and he switched to a centrist stance. Honestly, I try to find the explanation for this term, but I think it's more like democratic approach to their business. I don't know. People loved this novel stories, short stories in a way of describing news because it wasn't that boring, and people really got on the hook of the stories and this magazine itself. That's why it got, again, a huge popularity, and the influence of this magazine was growing steadily for a long period of time. But of course, a lot of people, they were repurchasing this business from the owners, and there was another purchase, another owner. The latest repurchase of the magazine, Time Magazine, happened in 2017, and they bought it for $3 billion, which is a great amount of money. If we're talking about just a regular magazine, this is probably one of the most influential magazines in the world. Though I don't really know with the hypocrisy. It's not a hypocrisy, I would say. I really love that they established this magazine, and they created an idea that anyone can get in the list of the most influential people, and they don't really have to be good. Okay, so hear me out. This is getting a little bit more important for you to understand that. In 1939, if I'm not mistaken, guess who got on the cover of this magazine? It was Joseph Stalin. And if I'm not mistaken, 1943 was Joseph Stalin again on the cover of a magazine. And Adolf Hitler was on the cover of a magazine of the most influential people in the world. It doesn't have to be someone with good deeds. It can be someone who got into news for as much as possible. So the gossip, the news, all of it was about one person in particular. And he got that influential that a lot of people, like this person, impacted someone's lives, or at least people were interested about the life of this person in particular. For example, if we're talking about Adolf Hitler, of course, he affected a lot of lives in Europe and all over the world, basically. And that is the main reason why he was on the cover of Times, because he was in the news all over the world, and because he definitely impacted someone's lives. And of course, it doesn't have to be in a good way. I guess, of course, we can't compare Blake Lively to Adolf Hitler or Stalin because they're just like absolutely different types of examples. But talking about Blake Lively, she wasn't on the cover. She's probably not going to be on the cover. And, the Popcorn Planet, Adam Singer, if I'm mistaken, he was talking that she got in the list of this, I guess, celebrities, allegedly, as he assumed, because she donated some money 6 years ago to a Black society community. But she had a plantation wedding, and he didn't understand. No one understood the reasonings behind this nomination, which I didn't understand as well. But now I get it. She was on top of the news over and over and over again. And yeah, it was bad PR, it was bad press, and she didn't really look good. But at the same time, Times doesn't really care if you're in good PR or bad PR. They know that you are in the news a lot, and that's what they talk about. And if you piss a lot of people, they still care about that, not because you were in good PR. Same thing. I mean, it's so funny when Blake Lively, when she was receiving this award, or I don't know, she was talking about some of the trauma and experience with her mom, and people hated this speech because she didn't talk about DV during the press tour about the whole movie that was filmed about DV. And now when she got in Times, I guess, news and this award, she started talking about DV. People don't really like it, and it doesn't really sit well with them. But fortunately or unfortunately, most of the time, people from Times and this influential people, they're not always going to be good people. And when she was so proud to receive this award, well, you shouldn't be proud, because Times basically nominated you not for being a good person. They nominated you for being in bad PR and in bad news. Someone could explain this to her. I mean, I didn't know that before I was doing my digging and finding out this information. But, when Adolf Hitler and Stalin were, nominated in the cover of the year, I guess, years before, I don't really think people thought of them highly and thought they were great. So she should probably keep it in mind that she wasn't nominated for good deeds. She was nominated for being bad in PR. Okay, now let's talk about where the cover of the year or the person of the year came from. Because when Times started their first ever issue, they didn't have anything like this. In 1927, right at the end of the year, almost to December, I guess, they realized that they didn't put on the cover once in a year one of the most influential people of 1927, and it was Charles Lindbergh. He was the first person that crossed the Atlantic Ocean in 1927, in May 1927, and he went from New York to Paris by himself without other people, and he actually set a record. When editors realized that he wasn't in the cover once in a year, they realized that they should probably correct this mistake and create this new nomination, a Man of the Year. And he had become the first ever Man of the Year. And yeah, that was the beginning of a new era. Next year, they chose a Woman of the Year, and then they changed this into Person of the Year. Basically, that was an editorial mistake that turned out into one of the most influential, I would say, categories of, nominations of awards to date. And of course, I just want to tell you my story of my family, what really happened during the Joseph Stalin. The Soviet Union took part in the Second World War, which is pretty much obvious. And my family actually suffered from Joseph Stalin as well. Not directly, I would say. My great-grandma, she was working on a plant, and she was taking care of a wool, or she was taking care of some of the fabrics. And once when she was taking out the trash, she picked a couple of bits of this fabrics, and someone actually saw her doing this, and she was in prison for taking the trash home. And then I know that people were easily in prison for taking peels of potatoes or some peels of carrots. Not my family, but other families, as well as people were killed for allegedly stealing, though it wasn't stealing. It was real trash that was thrown away. And my husband's family, they suffered through these great repressions in the Soviet Union. My husband's great-grandfather, he was accused in something else to get products or something, I guess, from the army, though he didn't, as allegedly my husband's family tells me, and he was in prison for that. Then for this, they sent him to the field where no one gets back. It's just like a suicide mission, I would say. But he survived, one of a few people he survived, and people got suspicious why he went through this fire and he didn't die. That was the main reason why. He was under control of KGB, and that started a new chapter in his life, because he had to, after the war was over, he had to be a driver for KGB. He had to drive the, minister people, KGB people, to the place, grab someone who's going to be in prison or killed, and drive him or her to a ministry. And that was his life or their life. That was a scary story to tell. If we're talking about my great-grandpa, he did not participate in war. And the reason was because when he got married to my great-grandma, I guess some tank with the gas just blew up, and he got in a fire. He was burning alive, and someone helped him only later someone covered him with a blanket to cut the oxygen from my great-grandpa, and the fire stopped, but he had 80% burns over his body. That was the main reason why he went through a lot of plastic surgeries. But before this plastic surgeries, leeches were taking the burn skin, and they were eating this burnt skin, and then they were just throwing them away, these leeches. So basically, leeches saved my great-grandpa's skin, and then plastic surgeries did a great job. I had a photo of my great-grandpa, and he was more or less normal. I didn't see a lot of my grandma said that my great-grandpa, he went through those plastic surgeries, but those surgeries were great. You couldn't spot a lot of the scars. Yeah, he had scars over his body, but his face was more or less okay. Why did I shift from this direction? I just wanted to tell you guys that the Soviet Union and the ruling of Joseph Stalin in Beria, his right hand, was cruel. It was really bad. But, fair to say, my teacher of history was saying that he was studying Stalin, and he said that he wasn't that bad. And most of some, sins that were related to just Joseph Stalin. He said it wasn't related to him. Some of his people, they were doing this behind his back. I don't know how true it is, but I know that a lot of people feared Stalin, and a lot of people were not only afraid of him, but the whole Soviet Union machine and the system. And, a lot of people were killed, even innocent people, for not even stealing, but for some trash. Not only 46 million people died in this war, but additional to that, I guess more millions of people were just killed because of the repressions. And yeah, this person unfortunately was on the Time cover twice. That's why when we're talking about some like Taylor Swift and maybe Vladimir Putin was a person of the year as well, many other politicians, they were on the cover. It's pretty obvious, as well as, I don't know, like Donald Trump. A lot of people were on the cover. It doesn't say these people are good or bad. They just went through this news and people were talking about them for quite a long period of time. I don't know how politics is invested in the deeds, I guess, of Time magazine. Maybe it's changed something. Maybe it's prestigious for people to get this award, though they haven't done anything good. But at the same time, I guess we can tell that Time magazine have a sense of humor for calling out people influential, but it can be in a really, really bad way. So that was my take on Times magazine and why this, let's say, tradition of picking influential people is not always good for them. And I guess it can add more fuel to the situation. But I don't know. Let's see what's going to happen next. Now, with this knowledge and with this information, I don't really see Blake Lively being nominated as injustice. I see it as a joke. Honestly, I see this as a joke because she went through bad PR and now she got a reward for being in a bad PR. Okay, but most of it is just my personal opinion. I don't really want to say that everything is 100% true. According to the sources that I was relying on and I am still relying on, it says that this is what it is, and Time magazine is something like this till the day. I love you all guys so much, and I'm going to see you in my next podcast. That's fine with me. Love you all. Bye-bye.